Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening up a file that is causing, and this isn't an exaggeration, genuine, verifiable, full-on panic in Hollywood boardrooms.
Right.
We're not talking about strikes. We're not even talking about budgets, really. We are talking about the ultimate audience rebellion, the viewing habits of Gen Z, and believe it or not, Gen Alpha.
It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? I mean, we are living in what everyone calls peak.
Right.
Studios are pouring tens of millions, sometimes, hundreds of millions of dollars into brand new, glossy, exclusive shows.
Yeah.
And they're all specifically designed to capture that youth demographic.
And the data just says it's not working.
Exactly. The data shows that the kids, the very consumers they are targeting, are just, ignoring it.
So our mission today is to unpack this industry meltdown and really understand the strange cultural logic that's driving it.
Yeah.
We're going to be diving into sources that detail the current state of television consumption, focusing on this totally counterintuitive reality, which is that Gen Z would genuinely prefer to queue up something classic, something their grandparents watch. And this is a real example, Gunsmoke.
Gunsmoke.
They'd rather watch that than the new streamer series that just dropped with a budget of, $20 million an episode.
And that phrase you used, full-on panic mode, that is 100% accurate. It has to be.
Why?
Because the entire modern media business model, it's all reliant on generating new, exclusive intellectual property. You need new stuff to justify those subscription fees that just keep going up.
Of course.
So when the audience you're specifically designing this expensive content for rejects it and instead prefers to stream a show that cost you $0 to produce this year,
then your whole model is broken.
Your foundation is structurally flawed. It just becomes this treadmill of completely unsustainable spending.
Okay, so let's unpack the root of this trend then, this dominance of retro content. Our sources point out that this isn't just about TV.
No, not at all.
This preference for the archive, the established, the genuinely old, it mirrors Gen Z's broader consumption habits across the board.
Exactly. It's a fascinating cultural pivot. It's almost a deliberate rejection of the fast, ephemeral, disposable nature of our current digital culture.
They're looking for something tangible.
They're chasing permanence and a tangible history. You see it everywhere. They're going back to analog media. Vinyl records are huge. Physical books.
Older video games.
Older video games and consoles, absolutely. The media of the past, it just offers this sense of stability and, a curated quality that the infinite scroll of modern content can't provide.
And in the world of television, that chase for permanence means choosing the big, established, well-loved series.
The comfort food.
The sheer comfort and predictability of a show with 200 episodes. Our source specifically points out that many Gen Z viewers would rather watch Friends,
which ended 2 decades ago.
A sitcom that ended 2 decades ago, rather than the current offerings that are supposedly tailored directly to them. It speaks volumes about perceived quality and the value of it all.
It really does. Look, Friends might not be everyone's favorite show, but it represents a known quantity. It's a cultural landmark.
A safe bet.
It's a safe bet. So when the choice is between spending, say, 6 hours testing out a brand new show that might get canceled or just vanish in a year,
right,
versus sinking those same 6 hours into a well-known high-volume library title that promises a guaranteed emotional return.
You take the guarantee?
You take the guarantee every single time. And this is where that structural difference in how we make content now really comes into play.
That's the core of the failure, isn't it? The difference between how TV used to be made and how it's made now.
Yeah.
And Gen Z is really feeling the pain of this current, fragmented model.
If you just look at the sheer volume and the frequency of content, the difference is just stark. Historically, especially in the U.S. network model, shows were volume-driven. We were just accustomed to production cycles that delivered 20, sometimes 26 episodes every single year.
That built a genuine rhythm into your life. You had new TV almost every single week outside of the big holidays. You literally planned your week around it.
Contrast that with the way we used to see foreign shows, especially from the UK. I mean, we used to mock the BBC for this structure.
Oh, yeah.
We'd get these acclaimed dramas on PBS, and they'd have 5 or 6 episodes, and then you'd have to wait what felt like a painful 2 years for the next little batch. We thought that model was just slow.
And now, ironically, Hollywood has adopted that absurd slow model.
But often without the guarantee of that BBC-level quality, that's the thing.
Exactly.
The current streaming model gives us these incredibly short seasons, maybe 6 to 8 episodes, that have a huge budget, sure, but they're hard to really establish deep roots with an audience.
You watch them over a weekend.
And then, here's the kicker, they often just vanish into the ether for these incredibly long...
And we're not talking a year. We're talking sometimes 3 years for the next small 6-episode batch.
Right.
That amount of time, that 3-year gap, is just a death sentence for building any kind of sustainable cultural momentum. It breaks any sense of continuity or habitual viewing.
How can a show become a widely shared experience when it disappears for 36 months?
It can't. You watch 6 hours of television, you forget about it completely, and you move on to watching the 400th episode of Grey's Anatomy while you wait for the next little piece of the new show to drop in 2027.
And that points directly to the economics of volume. The investment needed to launch those 6 episodes, which might be, $120 million total?
It's a huge amount.
It's immediately devalued when the audience just pivots right back to the comfort and the guaranteed longevity of the established high-volume library. The math just doesn't work for new IP when the old IP is so much more available and requires almost no ongoing investment.
That's a critical point. The audience is essentially demanding maximum value for their time and their subscription dollar, and 6 episodes every 3 years feels like a terrible value proposition compared to a binge-ready backlog.
So if we shift the focus to the analysis, the reason these older shows became cultural touchstones is directly linked to what we find.
The saturation problem.
The issue of market saturation, or as the source calls it, fragment.
Too much TV.
Yeah.
But let's define what that really means for the cultural landscape, because it's more than just choice.
Well, when shows like Cheers or Seinfeld or The Simpsons originally aired, the competition was just so limited. You had maybe 3, 4, 5 major broadcast networks and a handful of cable channels.
Right.
That scarcity is what allowed them to become these universally shared pop culture phenomenons. Everyone was watching, so everyone was talking. That communal experience, it was almost mandatory.
I often think of it like cultural gravity. Everything was focused on a few major points. Now that gravity has just dissolved.
That's a perfect metaphor. With the current streaming landscape, we are in a state of dissolved cultural gravity. There are hundreds of new shows competing for attention every...
So this fragmentation makes it nearly impossible for any single new show to achieve that status, that shared cultural experience.
Impossible. Everyone is watching something different on a different platform.
And this fragmentation leads directly to the core perceived failure in the new production model, which is the difference between, genuine creative pitching and this corporate algorithm-driven manufacturing.
This is where we see the crisis of authenticity emerge. The old model, the successful model, it involved creators pitching an idea to studio executives.
And sometimes those ideas were revolutionary, sometimes they were just quirky, and often they were a really hard sell.
Oh, absolutely. We all know the legend. The source material reminds us that some of the biggest hits today, like Seinfeld or The Simpsons, they were initially disliked by executives who just didn't get the vision.
But the creators persisted. They believed in the idea.
That whole process was driven by creative vision and instinct. The focus was on what resonates and what is truly original. Now you look at the new model.
The manufacturing line.
The manufacturing line. Studios appear to be trying to analyze the marketplace and manufacture hits based purely on data. They look at the analytics and they say, Gen Z is streaming Friends at a high rate. Therefore, we must engineer a Gen Z Friends clone.
Or they love Gilmore Girls, so let's greenlight a new show with quick, witty dialogue and some small-town charm.
They are trying to replicate past success using algorithms, which is just a fundamentally flawed strategy when you're dealing with culture.
And it's failing.
According to the analysis, that strategy is failing completely because Gen Z prefers the original material. They don't want the manufactured, data-driven knockoff. They want the authentic, retro experience.
They are currently streaming the original Gilmore Girls.
Right, not the attempt to replicate it. They have an excellent radar for inauthenticity.
It's the same pattern we see everywhere else. They want retro video games, they want the specific fashion aesthetics of the 80s and 90s, and they want the actual shows from those eras.
Which taps into a concept we really need to spend time on, the pull of simpler time. Or, maybe more accurately, unexperienced nostalgia. This is a powerful cultural force. They are nostalgic for an era they didn't personally live through. For many, the 80s and 90s represent this sort of cultural and maybe economic golden age, even if that perception is entirely mediated through fiction.
It's the stability and the kind of optimism that's baked into the content itself. They look at shows from those eras and they see a world that, while fictionalized, appeared less fraught, less economically precarious, and less saturated with constant demanding information.
And this is where the source raises a vital caveat, a really important point.
That it wasn't real.
that the nostalgia is often based on an idealized fantasy. Sitcoms from the 80s and 90s are often not an accurate representation of the reality of the time. This is particularly true when you look at economics and living.
The classic example is the sprawling, rent-controlled apartment in Manhattan.
Precisely. You watch Friends or Seinfeld, and the characters, a waitress, a comedian, they're living in 10,000 square foot lofts, massive Upper West Side apartment.
It's pure fantasy.
This wasn't the reality for most people then, but it is deeply aspirational now. Today, a young person looks at that fantasy and they contrast it with their own reality.
Skyrocketing rents, mountains of debt.
The impossibility of homeownership. And the content provides this stable, comforting escape back to a perceived time of plenty.
So the desire for that perceived simplicity and economic stability, it draws them toward the older, more iconic and widely heard of shows.
Yeah.
These are the shows that were the water cooler discussion topics. And Gen Z, in their own ways, trying to reclaim that shared cultural moment by watching what was shared.
It's the search for monoculture in a fragmented world. By choosing these established, archived hits, they are self-selecting into a cultural conversation that has already been validated by...
Okay, so to move from the philosophical to the empirical, we need to show exactly how serious this trend is.
Let's see the data.
We have a breakdown of some of the most streamed shows so far in 2025. And this is measured by total minutes watched, drawing directly from analysis shared by MSN. This list is the smoking gun that proves Hollywood's panic.
It really is.
New shows just are not breaking through the dominance of the old guard.
And it's crucial to anchor this discussion in that metric. Most streamed is based on total minutes watched.
Right.
This means that volume is king. It naturally creates a massive advantage for any show that has amassed hundreds or even thousands of hours of content over decades. The audience is voting with their time, and they are choosing quantity, but crucially, quality.
Let's look at the overview. And we have to acknowledge some current high-profile limited series are breaking through.
Of course.
Shows like Squid Game, Reacher, The Night Agent, White Lotus. These prove that if the quality is absolutely extraordinary, people will watch.
That's an important caveat. High budget, high concept, highly acclaimed limited series can achieve a consensus, but they are the exception that proves the rule.
Right.
The vast majority of the list represents programs that have either long finished their run or are from 10 or more years ago.
The longevity and sheer volume of these older shows are just staggering when you look at the raw numbers. Let's take Grey's Anatomy, for example. It's a major entry on this list, noted specifically for its massive episode count. We are talking 452 episodes.
And NCIS is right there with it. The core insight here is that when a viewer chooses Grey's Anatomy, they aren't just watching a random hour. They are often committing to watching all of those episodes.
The whole thing.
They're investing hundreds of hours into this backlog instead of spending those valuable minutes watching the 6 episodes of a new limited series that will be over in one night and forgotten the next morning.
It's a guaranteed time sink, and it validates their $15 monthly subscription. The consumer does the math. Why am I paying for a streamer if I'm not going to get 400 hours of comfort?
The older shows provide that guaranteed return on investment.
And that leads us to the unexpected resurgence of some real classics, proving this trend goes way beyond just 90s nostalgia. We are talking about deep archival cuts being consumed at rates that have to alarm executives.
Okay, this is my favorite part of the whole data set.
It's got to be Gunsmoke.
It's Gunsmoke. That is a Western that first aired in 1955. It ran for 2 decades. This is content that is 70 years.
And it's often accessed not even through the big subscription streamers, right?
Yeah.
Through these specific themed networks.
Exactly. The free ad-supported streaming, the FAST channel, like the dedicated Gunsmoke network you can find on Roku or Pluto.
And the fact that this deep-cut historical content contributes significantly to the total streamed minutes shows that if the content exists, if it's easy to access, often for free.
Which is key.
And it has that historical volume, these younger audiences will find it, often through an algorithm, and they will consume massive amounts of it.
And that's often driven by accessibility. Fast channels are free, which appeals greatly to a younger, more budget-conscious generation. They surf these channels, they find something that's just perpetually running, and it becomes a source of comfort viewing. It's a very low-stakes commitment.
And then there's MMers.
MMAsh. MASH is a genuinely fascinating hit. The source material notes that MMAsh was old even where people our age is.
I remember it being on in reruns, yeah.
Yet here it is, decades later, still being viewed and consumed heavily. So what's the mechanism there? It's not just accessibility, it's the timeless quality of the writing and the theme. It was a show that was way ahead of its time, dealing with complex issues under the guise of comedy. It translates effortlessly across decades.
And it has the volume. 11 seasons, over 250 episodes, perfect for binging. And coming back to that 90s Geezens period, we have Gilmore Girls specifically highlighted as being really popular right now, alongside Supernatural, which is cited as a show everybody keeps watching more and more.
Both of those shows have high episode counts, but they also have these very distinct, loyal, and enthusiastic fandoms.
Oh, yeah.
Supernatural is a perfect example of a show with an intensely devoted fan base who engages constantly with the content, watches and rewatches, and constantly creates new social media assets around it. That fan dedication translates directly into streamed minutes, which is exactly what Hollywood needs to track.
Okay, so let's break down the rest of this list. Looking at the driving demographics, we see current family hits like Bluey,
Of course.
which is a universal success. It appeals to parents and children alike. But then you transition immediately into what the source affectionately calls boomer shows, which are the ultimate marathon content.
Yes, NCIS is noted for its massive fan base, often consisting of dedicated viewers who have seen every episode multiple times. They use it as background noise, as comfort viewing.
Grey's Anatomy serves a similar.
And then we have the behemoth that is the procedural universe of Law & Order.
The joke in the source about Law & Order, New York, LA, Arkansas, it's funny because it hints at the incredible, almost endless volume. If you started watching all the iterations of Law & Order today, you would be busy for the next 5 years.
That volume is the safety net for the streamer. It guarantees retention.
Right.
And we can't forget the long-running animated hits that are just universally consumed across generations. Family Guy, Bob's Burgers, and SpongeBob. These never leave the top 20 because they appeal across demographics and age group, providing constant low-effort.
And the dominant sitcom, Friends, The Big Bang Theory, and its successful prequel, Young Sheldon, which is directly tied to the popularity of the original show American Dad, and South Park. It's a list of cultural constants.
We also see major contributions from procedural dramas like Criminal Minds and a few other niche genres making the cut. What is incredibly clear is that the list represents a successful, high-volume show from virtually every decade over the last 7.
It confirms that quality, accessibility, and volume, regardless of age, dominate.
Yeah, that's the takeaway.
And the final, crucial detail is how this older content is often shared intergenerationally. The list includes shows favored by older generations that are now being discovered by younger audiences, either through family viewing or just curious discovery.
We hear anecdotes about teenagers tuning into things like I Love Lucy, Designing Women, The Golden Girls, even deep cuts like That Girl. The source provides this anecdote about a teenager watching older shows and liking them because there's just like a certain something about it.
That certain something is the authenticity we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Combined with the structural simplicity of the world depicted. It's less frantic, less demanding.
And that includes movies, too. The source notes 80s comedies like Stripes and Private Benjamin grabbing the attention of younger viewers. They might start watching with a bit of irony, but they often become glued to the content because the story structure and the comedic timing just hold up.
They're discovering foundational pop culture,
Which, unlike the hyper-curated manufactured new releases, feels organic and historically significant.
So the overall analysis of the data is clear. The most valuable content today is the archived content, just deeply ironic considering the cost of new content development.
It creates a massive internal conflict for the studios. They spend billions trying to create the next Friends, but the audience just chooses the original Friends. The investment is not generating the loyalty they require.
That brings us to a fascinating case study. If old content is dominating and new content is struggling to break through all this fragmentation, how does a modern show actually gain genuine, high volume, and young viewership? The answer is often counterintuitive. It involves an older actor and a brand new, completely organic promotional machine, TikTok.
Here's where the media landscape truly evolves, because it shows that Gen Z is capable of elevating new content, but often completely bypassing the traditional expensive marketing pipeline.
Right.
We are talking about the phenomenon surrounding The Rookie.
Yes, The Rookie, starring Nathan Fillion. It's a perfectly good procedural drama, but it was initially perceived as a very specific demographic show.
It was the millennial dad.
The Millennial Dad Show. Solid, reliable, comfortable, but not exactly a global youth phenomenon designed to sell t-shirts to teenagers.
Yet, almost overnight, it has become huge with Gen Z viewers, specifically teenagers aged 13 to 17.
The data on this is wild.
The data collected in June was astounding. The Rookie was a 5th most popular show among that critical 13 to 17 demographic. That is an enormous, unexpected surge in popularity for a show that was never targeted at that cohort.
And the mechanism for this popularity is clearly and directly attributed to the social media platform TikTok. So explain how TikTok accelerates this, because it's not just about a trailer appearing in your feed.
No, it's entirely peer-to-peer. TikTok functions by distributing these short, hyper-edited clips, often focused on specific character dynamics, emotional beats, or comedic moments.
Set to trending music.
which are then amplified by users, often set to trending. These clips are like micro-narratives that require no prior context. A teenager's 30-second edit featuring a funny or dramatic interaction between two characters on the rookie. They don't know the plot, but they like the vibe or the actor.
So TikTok provides the highlight, and that drives the audience to the source material, to watch the full 42-minute episode, to understand the context of the clip they just saw.
Exactly. It flips the promotional script entirely. Traditional marketing tries to sell you the plot. TikTok sells you the vibe and the connection. The platform functions as the new water cooler, driving what becomes a communal experience, but it's based on organic discovery and user-generated content.
What's fascinating here is the real-world, high-level promotional implication of this unexpected fandom. The studios are watching this organic growth, and they're reacting to it rather than driving it.
The source mentions a direct, high-profile consequence. Studio executives, realizing that the kids were suddenly obsessed with the rookie and with Nathan Fillion, started pushing Fillion's character, Guy Gardner, into promotional materials for the new Superman.
Wait, hold on. So they were adjusting the marketing strategy for a massive cinematic universe film because of the organic popularity of a network procedural show on TikTok.
Yes.
That is an incredible pivot.
It proves that Hollywood's marketing departments had to course correct based on this organic, social media-driven hit. The implication is that Gen Z's attention is not purchased through traditional ad buys. It is earned through cultural relevance, and that relevance can originate anywhere, even in unassuming procedural drama.
And they recognize the value of leveraging that existing validated fan base for a much bigger project.
Absolutely.
And this mechanism isn't exclusive to the rookie. We're seeing TikTok accelerate the popularity of older archival content too, which just bolsters the very trend of retro dominance we've been discussing.
Absolutely. TikTok is not just promoting new things, it's reanimating old shows like Grey's Anatomy, NCIS, and Criminal Minds. They see massive boosts in viewership because TikTok edits and fan tributes keep them perpetually relevant. The best clips from those shows are constantly recirculating, hooking new audiences decades after the episode's original.
Those procedural dramas are perfect for short, punchy, emotional clips. You get the peak emotional or dramatic moment in 30 seconds, and that drives you to seek out the full backlog.
And it also applies perfectly to comedies like New Girl and Parks and Recreation. The 90s nostalgia loop, powered by TikTok, is incredibly strong. The source mentions two 90s shows that Gen Z has watched, The Office and The X-Files. The Office specifically is the definition of comfort show that families watch.
That rewatch value is the ultimate validation of quality and accessibility. They're choosing to invest their time hundreds of hours in a known, established commodity rather than sample a new, risky one.
When they go back to these iconic shows, the more heard of ones, it's because they're seeking that cultural consensus. They're ignoring the new shows that are competing against each other and simply going back to what is historically validated as good established.
And TikTok just serves as the highly efficient personalized librarian.
Yes, pulling archival content off the dusty shelf and showing them the best 30 seconds.
This entire phenomenon leads us to a broader, almost existential question for Hollywood that touches upon cultural dynamics.
Yeah.
Have we hit peak pop culture? And what does that mean for shared human experience?
This is a heavy, almost philosophical. There's one argument, the pessimistic one, and one that the fragmentation data strongly that suggests that yes, we may have hit peak pop culture.
Meaning what?
Meaning the communal experiences we enjoyed in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s may be permanently gone because everything first choices and therefore no shared cultural focus.
If everyone is watching something different, we lose the social currency that comes from having watched the same show. I mean, that's a depressing thought because shared experiences are vital for connection.
But there is an optimistic counter-argument that stems directly from Gen Z.
Okay.
Since they are actively seeking out these communal experiences, they want to talk about the same shows, hence the drive toward Friends and The Office. They might actively try to walk it back or recreate that shared environment as they gain cultural and financial.
So they might be the generation that actively rejects fragmentation.
They might be. And they might begin focusing their attention on fewer, higher quality, long-running properties.
To understand what they're trying to recreate, we have to look back at the historical context of engineered communal view, the ultimate shared experience being NBC's must-see TV.
That was truly brilliant structural training for the audience. The networks explicitly train viewers to watch the same shows at the same time on a specific night, usually Thursday.
It created an appointment viewing system that made the content culturally mandatory.
It was a perfectly executed lineup, starting with shows that were guaranteed hit, moving into the flagship comedy block, and ending with a new drama. They followed the model set by shows like Cosby and Cheers, and later cemented it with Friends and Seinfeld.
And it worked because the next day, everyone at the water cooler at school was talking about the exact same things. That conversation was the reward for watching.
The source brings up that nostalgic memory of talking about ALF at school. Did you see ALF last night? You almost got the cat.
Right.
That level of low stakes, universal familiarity is what generates cultural cement.
That cultural cement is entirely missing today. You ask someone what they watched last night, and they might list 5 different limited series you've never even heard of.
Yeah.
So if Hollywood cannot generate that shared culture organically with new content, another scenario emerges. And it's one that involves a severe industry contraction.
This is the Highlander scenario. There can be only one. It is entirely possible that the streaming model, driven by the unsustainable spending required to create thousands of hours of disposable content, could suffer a massive, catastrophic contraction.
Explain how that contraction would actually happen in business terms. It's not just studios deciding to spend less, is it?
No. It's driven by debt and investor fatigue. The current sheer volume of content, 400 or more scripted shows per year across all platforms, is financially unsustainable if the audience is rejecting the majority of it in favor of old reruns.
So what happens?
This contraction would likely result from mergers and acquisitions, massive content write-downs, and a sharp reduction in green.
So rather than funding 50 middling dramas, a major studio might only greenlight 5 shows, and those 5 shows have to be guaranteed cultural touchstones.
Exactly. This contraction could result in only a handful of new, universally high-quality shows being produced annually. The audience would then be forced, out of scarcity, to watch those few shows simply because they are the only significant new content.
A return to the old landscape.
A return to the old landscape, but driven not by structural design, but by massive financial failure and consolidation.
If that happens, it would be difficult for the thousands of people who work in production, but it might force a return to quality and the high episode counts that the audience is currently demanding via their viewing habits.
The audience is clearly signaling their desire for, and what drives much of the frustration among viewers who prefer the old content is Hollywood's frustrating tendency to constantly revisit, reboot, or make new versions of those old hits.
It's the ultimate failure to trust the original material, isn't it? They reboot content because the original IP is the only thing that seems to guarantee audience recognition in a fragmented world.
And the expressed desire from the cultural commentators in our sources is for the industry to recognize the inherent quality and historical integrity of the originals and simply keep your filthy fingers off them.
Leave it alone.
The goal is to allow the existing successful content to stand on its own merit without being diluted or ruined by manufactured, unnecessary reboots, reunions, or spin-offs that destroy the brand integrity.
This leads to the ultimate example of preservation, Northern Exposure.
Ah, yes. Northern Exposure. The source highly recommends it as one of the best shows ever made, having started in 1990. It was noted for being ahead of its time, featuring intelligent, complex, and diverse writing. It holds up remarkably well today, precisely because it was so thoughtfully. It might have been too far ahead of the curve to be a massive monocultural hit then.
But the crucial point is that it should not be touched now. It's perfect as it is.
Absolutely. The takeaway is, if a great established show exists, allow the younger generation to discover it organically. Perhaps let it get TikToked into new popularity.
But don't reboot it.
But do not reboot it in some zombie form that attempts to modernize the themes or characters. The desperation of Hollywood to reboot is the ultimate symptom of the failure of their new manufactured content. They can't create new hits, so they desecrate the old.
It's a vicious cycle that further drives the audience away from current production and back into the archive.
So if we synthesize everything we've covered, the picture is pretty clear. The desire for high-volume, guaranteed quality content, paired with a touch of comforting, unexperienced nostalgia for a simpler economic time, is driving younger audiences directly toward the archive.
And this fundamentally challenges the current short-season, fragmented, expensive streaming model.
And Hollywood's reaction trying to manufacture hits based on flawed market analysis instead of trusting truly original, high-volume creative ideas is exacerbating the problem by creating content that feels inauthentic and disposable.
And what this means for you, the listener, is that while the fragmentation of content gives you more choice than ever before, you have less communal focus.
Yep.
You have to work harder or rely on organic social media algorithms to find those shared cultural moments that once defined your generation's viewing experience.
But the data confirms that quality and volume still win out over marketing hype. If a show has 452 episodes of established quality, that archive will beat a 6-episode new launch every single time.
Proving the audience is demanding a return to foundational stability in their entertainment.
So here's our final provocative thought for you to chew on. Given the current overwhelming demand for old, iconic, long-running shows and the consistent failure of manufactured new content, should Hollywood cease actively creating Gen Z or algorithm-driven niche shows entirely?
And instead, focus its limited new production efforts solely on generating universally high-quality, long-form content. Think 22 episodes a season aimed at all demographics, trusting that the market guided by organic social media virality, not studio executive fiat, will find and elevate the genuine gems to shared cultural status.
It's a question of whether the market, fewer, better.